We are used to thinking of places as passive, just settings or stages where stories unfold. But what if that's wrong? What if there are places that don't just host tragedy, they call for it? A kind of spatial malignancy, something written into the soil, woven into the silence, shaped into the land itself. They wait with an open mouth, motionless, like a deep-sea creature, lurking in black water, not chasing, not hunting, only waiting for the broken and the unwitting to drift too close. There is darkness in the world, and there must be places where it pools like water in a basin. What if some places aren't just haunted? What if they architect their own haunting? They call it the Bridgewater Triangle. It's a name given in the 1970s to make sense of something that was senseless. A small patch of land in southern Massachusetts between Abington, Freetown, and Rehoboth. Within those boundaries, there were high concentrations of the unexplainable. Cryptid sightings, phantom lights, missing persons, and ritualistic violence. Yet none of that really describes it. The Bridgewater Triangle isn't an area of containment. It's a boundary failure, a pocket in the world where things that shouldn't be are. Not just ghosts or lights or creatures in the trees, but the collapse of category itself. It's a phenomenon that is systemic, geological, a sickness in place. And at the very heart of the Bridgewater Triangle is Freetown State Forest. We have brushed its border twice before. In the satanic cult of Fall River, it was said there was ritualistic abuse and violence that happened in Freetown State Forest. It was here that a satanic cult of prostitutes and pimps sacrificed lives to summon the devil. Even after the culprits were locked away, Detective Alan Alves reported finding multiple ritualistic sites in the forest in the years following the Fall River murders. The sites contained pentagrams, animal mutilations, and makeshift shrines and altars, which he believed was a clear sign of ongoing cult activity. And some of the victims of the New Bedford highway killer were from Freetown and Fall River. Anthony DeGrazia, a man that many believed could have been the highway killer himself, was arrested after assaulting 2 girls in the Freetown State Forest. He would ultimately commit suicide. The more you dig, the more names seem to pass through these trees, as if the forest itself were laundering some motive, some evil into the world. And once you begin to examine how many threads lead back to the forest, you start to wonder if Freetown isn't just where people go to do something terrible, but where something terrible is drawing them in. Long before it was called Massachusetts, before there were borders or towns or maps, the Freetown State Forest belonged to the Wampanoag. This area was not only their home, but it held spiritual significance. The Hockomock Swamp, whose name means place where spirits dwell, was considered sacred and was used as a burial ground. In 1670, during a colonizing war, the Wampanoag lost a sacred item, the wampum belt, a symbol of their heritage and power. The loss of this artifact is said to have unleashed a curse on the land, condemning it to be a place of unrest and supernatural occurrences. Even today, the surviving Wampanoag remain tied to this place. The Assinet Band keeps a reservation inside the forest. They have 227 acres of reservation land deep within the trees. One of the curses from the Wampanoag were creatures called pukwudgies, small, gray, human-shaped, similar to other malevolent forest creatures. They lure travelers off safe paths, push them off cliffs, and whisper to them in voices they almost recognize. At the Assinet Ledge, hikers report a sudden depressive mood, a feeling of being watched from below, a cold urge to leap from the ledge. Some see shapes in the trees, some disappear beyond the trail. These stories may be too subjective for merit, but the shadows would stop being just shadows. The stories would become more than just stories once blood was spilled. On November 11th, 1978, two boys were riding their dirt bikes in the Freetown State Forest, off the trails, out where the trees grow together and light gets muddied. That's where they found her, tied to a tree, a 15-year-old cheerleader named Mary Lou Arruda. She had been missing for over 2 months, abducted in broad daylight from her neighborhood in Raynham, Massachusetts. She had been long dead, her body badly decomposed, her head severed, but not cleanly. Some reports said she had been tied standing up, that she died slowly, the forest keeping her longer than it should have. The man convicted of her murder, James Cater, was tried and convicted, but some said there were things about the investigation that didn't add up. They suggested there was cult activity in the forest, claims that evidence had been withheld, whispers that maybe Cater wasn't the only shadow moving through the forest. But the official story remained simple, as it often does. One man, one victim, one tragedy. But the unofficial story continues to this day, a forest that continues to whisper. Because Mary Lou wasn't found on a trail. She wasn't found near a road. She was found deep within the trees, as if the forest itself hadn't just hidden her, but had taken her deeper. In the years that followed, the forest gathered more bodies. In 1987, a homeless man named Edward Serrato was found dead deep in the woods, shot 6 times after being mistaken for an undercover cop during a drug deal gone wrong. In 2001, 2 more bodies, Edward Negron and Rosandro Medina, were found riddled with bullets near Bell Rock Road, a narrow stretch cutting through the forest's southern boundary. No motive or suspects. The strange crimes continued, and one detective appeared as a guard against the forest. It was Alan Alves, a Freetown state detective who spent decades investigating the forest's bizarre crimes. The locals called him the Cult Cop. He built his career on tracking what he called occult violence. He uncovered strange sites, clearings in the woods with pentagrams spray-painted or burned nearby. He collected accounts of bloodless animal carcasses, dogs, goats, small livestock. His most notorious find was a decaying shack deep in the woods near Bell Rock Road, allegedly used for rituals by Carl Drew and the other Fall River cult members. He claimed to find the remnants of rituals. It was his testimony that helped frame the murders in Fall River as the work of a satanic cult, and critics say Alves was a victim of satanic panic, that he saw symbols where there were none, that he mistook vandalism and cruelty for something organized and mythic. After several ethics violations, he lost his badge, but he wasn't the only one stuck ruminating on the forest's reputation. Hikers reported phantom lights moving through the trees, glowing orbs that hovered, pulsed, and disappeared. Black helicopters seen hovering silently above the forest, their engines humming too quiet for real physics. Even President Ronald Reagan, passing through Massachusetts in the 1970s, claimed to see strange lights in the sky, an encounter he would later describe as unexplained. We are taught to think of places as passive. We map them, build over them, we name them, and in doing so, we convince ourselves they are empty, waiting for us to define them. But the Freetown State Forest has never been empty. It has never been passive. It has taken body after body, year after year, and it remains silent and patient. What if these are not isolated tragedies, not disconnected acts of violence and madness? What if they are fractures in the surface, the creeping evidence of something deeper? What if the Bridgewater Triangle is a wound where history, grief, and violence pool together, feeding something beneath? Maybe the murders in Fall River were not born from men alone. Maybe the New Bedford disappearances happened because of intent, not chance. Maybe the stories we tell ourselves about hauntings and cults and crime are ways to make sense of something worse. Maybe the real horror isn't just what has been done here. Maybe the real horror is that the soil itself calls for it.